Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Arctic Wire Rope and Supply, an Alaskan company providing lifting and rigging products since 1983. Manufacturing custom wire rope, chains, and nylon slings here in Anchorage. On the web at arcticwirerope.com.
The National Weather Service.
Good Saturday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 24th of January. As always, we hope you're keeping up to date with the latest weather in your community and village by going to weather.gov/Alaska or listening to the forecast on NOAA Weather Radio or Marine VHF. Call us on 800-472-0391 to get the weather info line. Find us on Facebook, on Twitter, and on YouTube each afternoon. You'll get kind of a sneak peek of the forecast there as well, especially if you use the tag AKwx TV. You can go back and watch the entire Alaska Weather Show later on in the evening. Tonight's hazardous weather includes winter weather advisories that are continuing for the Copper River Basin. A winter storm warning for the eastern Alaska Range could see storm totals there upwards of 20 to 30 inches of snow, especially west of the Tote Cutoff, and then about 6 to 9 inch totals there for the 40-mile country and up around the Deltana and Tanana Flats region. The snow will gradually come to an end as we go through the daytime tomorrow, but up north it's bitter cold. Wind chill advisories around 45 below for the Brooks Range and the Arctic coast, and also around the Chukchi Seacoast in the interior of the Seward Peninsula. But if that wasn't all, blizzard watches are now posted for the Pribilofs, so we'll watch for that as we head into Monday morning with north and easterly winds developing and starting to come up as we go into Sunday night and Monday, so watch for changes there. Here's a look at some of the snowfall totals we saw around the interior just in the last 24 hours or so. Eielson Air Force Base is the winner here with 11 inches. Denali National Park saw about 10.5 inches. The dogs and the folks there will be very happy to see that. North Pole saw about 8.7 inches at the Fairbanks Airport. 3 inches there on the button. East Farmers Loop about 2.8, and around the college about 2.1 inches there. That from the interior. What about South Central? Talkeetna, the big winner, with up to 1 inch an hour at times in parts of the Susitna Valley. Both Willow and Talkeetna saw a good deal of snow just in the last day and a half or so. Trapper Creek about 10 inches. Mount Susitna near 8. Kenai 6 up around Eagle River, a little bit more than that. The Anchorage National Weather Service office saw 4.8, and Sterling saw about 4 inches there. A lot of that was really limited to the western side of the Cook Inlet coast and right up into the Susitna Valley. Now it's still snowing in some areas, though lightly, so watch for the fluff to continue. But now following that will be bitter cold. For South Central, look for temperatures in the Matanuska Valley to drop to about 3 below tonight. Talkeetna 8 below, Gulkana about 4, Valdez around 28, Kenai 4 below, and then it gets worse for Sunday night into Monday morning. 13 below in Palmer, 8 below in Anchorage, 17 below in Talkeetna, and 29 below in Gulkana. Well, the folks in the interior are laughing right now because they know it's going to get colder than that. You're looking at temperatures that could go to their coldest point so far this season. It looks like Fairbanks, as we head into Monday morning, we'll be looking at 38 below, Tanana 45 below, Bettles 46 below, around McKinley Park 35 below, about the same there for Big Delta, Toke around 38 below, and Chicken 44 below. So big time cold is coming to the interior in the wake of this storm as that northerly wind comes in. You've got a clear sky, dry air, all the perfect ingredients to see those temperatures drop like a rock. Here's a look at the satellite picture out across the Bering. You can see a pretty healthy storm working its way south of the Kamchatka Peninsula, now moving eastward. The occlusion's working into the Aleutians, slowly working its way northward. And as it does so, it's starting to bring in more wind to the Pribilofs. With that, that's what we're watching for. The blizzard watch as we go into Monday morning, and then in Monday afternoon. We expect those north and easterly winds to come up 35 to about 40 miles per hour and probably about 2 inches of snow. So visibility is going to drop, and with that and the falling snow, we expect blizzard conditions are possible at this point. So watch for Monday there if you're in the Pribilofs. As we look at the rest of Alaska, you'll notice there's still active weather across southern parts of southeast. This next wave of low pressures come up with a lot of warm air and decent amounts of rain there, and probably some pretty strong gusts around the Haida region and into central and southern parts of southeast. A blustery day for sure. But that warm weather has also set some records around Annette today, a record high of 51 degrees there. That weather is starting to move northward, but you'll see those northerly winds wind faster, I think, than that warm air is going to move north. So as we head into the next couple days, you'll be influenced a lot more by the cold that's working its way across the Gulf of Alaska and out of the interior than that warm weather that's trying to sneak its way back in. It's not time for that yet. As we look at the interior, you can see clouds stretching across the eastern parts of the 40-mile country all the way down into Prince William Sound. Those clouds are starting to pull out slowly and surely. There's still some snow over the Chugach Range and parts of Prince William Sound, and certainly coming down pretty hard around the Valdez area as well. For the Cook Inlet region, things are clearing out, and all of this is just cold ground. So we know that there's clear and cold weather for the bulk of Alaska tonight, and those winds blowing offshore are starting to push the ice further and further southward, but it doesn't look like a lot of that is terribly shore fast around Norton Sound. So even if you are in places that have sea ice, it might not be terribly stable just yet. So again, be careful out there around Norton Sound. That's a message from our sea ice desk experts there. Out across the central and western chain, those clouds moving northward, part of that occlusion that's starting to move its way closer and closer to the chain. We saw some snow in Shemya today, but high pressure up across the north is driving that cold out to sea. With that, we expect many opportunities for heavy freezing spray across the Bering Sea and across Cook Inlet, Shelikof Strait, the Barrens, and into areas across the northern Gulf. So if you're planning to go out to sea tomorrow, make sure you're checking on conditions there, because heavy freezing spray will be a possibility over at least the next 24 hours. Low pressure sitting just around Prince William Sound tomorrow and tonight, and as that frontal boundary swings ashore, we're still going to have west and southwesterly winds producing rainfall across southeast. That may mix a little bit more in with rain and snow around Yakutat and northern parts of southeast. Still looks like it's mostly going to be rain around Juneau, but you may see a mix. And across the Alcan border and just to the west, periods of snow, maybe heavy snow around the Alaska Range, but after this drier air moves in behind it, watch for that trough to move eastward quickly, and then the drier air starts to settle in. You should see a pretty clear bluebird day across south central tomorrow, out across the south and west, and occlusions working its way toward the Aleutians, probably nosing up on the chain as we get into Sunday afternoon. That front will probably park right over Adak and Atka and stay just south of Nikolsky and Dutch Harbor, Unalaska. Rain and snow will be possible with you. Very little accumulations expected at this point, but you might see a little bit of slush out there. Fog may be possible in some areas along the Yukon Valley and northward toward the Brooks Range. Snow showers for the Beaufort Seacoast as we get into Sunday and Monday. A few snow showers will continue there with high pressure working its way quickly into the northern part of Yukon. That means the cold is going with it, and with that comes that bitter cold in the morning. We'll have a trough of low pressure sitting right up the Susitna Valley across the Alaska Range, and if that's the case, that means we're going to have a little bit more of a northerly flow. So the cold here is going to be the cold there as we get into Monday night and Tuesday morning. Low pressure sitting across the central parts of the chain will allow the occlusion to work its way into the southern Bering. With that, we get that stronger easterly, northeasterly flow coming into the Pribilofs, and with the wind and the snow, that's the blizzard that we're watching for. So a blizzard watch again is in effect for Monday morning for the Pribilofs. Low pressure south of Haida at 1,001 millibars, also trying to work northward once again with another surge of warmer weather. A lot of that's going to stay to the south, and as long as we have a trough of low pressure lingering here, it looks like things should clear out a little bit for Monday. So Monday may be a better day in the southeast than what you'll have on Sunday. So an awful lot going on in every corner of Alaska, whether it's the bitter cold, the rain and snow, blizzard conditions, or just a few snow showers lingering in your region. Today's temperatures were in the 40s, and again, Annette made it to 51 this afternoon, a new record high for you. 30s and 40s otherwise, 42 up around Skagway, 20s and 30s around Prince William Sound. Valdez was sitting at 32, seeing rain and snow, and then more snow and maybe a little bit of rain mixed in. 14 in Anchorage, 16 in Kenai today, 14 in Talkeetna. You go over the Alaska Range and it was much colder, 10 to 20 below there. Look at 20 below in Fairbanks, 1 above in Eagle, 8 below in Fort Yukon late this afternoon. Ambler and Bettles, really cold stuff. I think Huslia made it down to 50 below today. Yeah, that's pretty cold. 27 below in Arctic Village, 24 below in AKwx Pass, anywhere from 20 to 30 below for the Arctic coast. AKwx was 29 below. Kivalina saw 12 below around Kotzebue, 19 below, 15 below in Nome, 22 below in Unalakleet, 20 below in McGrath, a little bit milder there considering some of the temperatures to your north, 12 below in Bethel. And southwestern locations saw temps in the single digits with Dillingham at 7, King Salmon 1 degree above zero. Teens, 20s, even a few 30s there for the Alaska Peninsula. Sandpoint 27, 31 in Unalaska Dutch Harbor. The Pribilofs were in the lower 20s, and the central and western chain hovering at or just above freezing today. Overnight lows again are going to be pretty cold, anywhere from 30 to maybe 50 below across some of the middle Yukon Valley. The Arctic coast 20 to 30 below, southwest anywhere from 5 below to 20 below around Bethel at 31 below there. Kodiak looking at 17, mild by comparison, 20s and 30s for Prince William Sound, 1 below in Anchorage, looks like 30s and 40s for southeast, and mid-30s for the chain with high temperatures there tomorrow in the lower 40s. The interior does not recover much at all. That cold just hangs in tight, anywhere from 20 to 35 below at best. Anywhere from 15 to 30 below for the Arctic coast. Nome 8 below, south central from 5 below to about 15 above, 27 in Kodiak, and lower to mid-40s in southeast. Sounds almost tropical. As we look at flying weather, expect IFR conditions to linger around the Wrangell-St. Elias region with pockets of MVFR for southeast through the rest of the afternoon. Improving visibility for south central, southwest. The interior still seeing some snow showers and some IFR and MVFR north of the Yukon Valley. For the west, IFR conditions for the central chain may be out toward Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, but a lot of that will probably linger on the south side. Your pass conditions show VFR conditions for AKwx and Adigan Pass tomorrow, so it should be okay there, just plain old cold. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass should be okay as far as visibility goes. Rainy Pass should be fine. You'll see transitioning toward some improvement there toward Windy Pass, MVFR to start. Isabel Pass, expect MVFR transitioning toward VFR. Mentasta Pass, we expect IFR to start, but improving throughout the day. Tanita Pass will also start around marginal conditions. Portage Pass should be fine. However, winds may be strong at times, so watch the turbulence there, even though visibility should be okay. And Chilkoot and White Pass, we expect to see IFR conditions there. Well, with all the talk of the cold, it's no surprise that the surface freezing line has dropped to the Alaska Peninsula and west of the Pribilofs. In fact, the upper level warmer air is even dropping southward, so now we only see 2,000 and 4,000 foot freezing levels across southeastern Alaska, well over the Gulf, and also south of the chain. Icing potential is moving eastward, mainly above 6,000 feet at this point. This is the warmer side of that storm system, so that's not too much of a surprise. Some of that will linger across the central and eastern parts of the higher terrain for southeast tomorrow, and above 3,000 feet for the central and western chain. Again, some of that's above 3,000 feet, maybe reaching occasional moderate there west of Nikolsky and east of Atka. As we look at the jet stream, this is what's bringing us that cold. We're back into more of a westerly flow now, so any cold here can become cold over here and drop southward. We've got a westerly jet stream coming across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and then a really powerful push from the south across the deeper parts of the Pacific that are pushing that warm and wet air right across Haida Gwaii and northward. So all of that moisture and any low pressure system here easily winds up in southeastern Alaska. Meanwhile, the rest of Alaska is getting a taste of that Arctic cold, and that's the upper level weather pattern that makes all that possible. The trough of low pressure across the interior of Alaska brings us a northwesterly flow at 9,000 feet. Wind speeds there around 15 to 25 knots with westerlies across south central Alaska, and then we have southerlies coming into the Gulf of Alaska with a ridge of high pressure to our south. Low pressure sitting south of the chain there, 25 knots coming in from the east, and that's also helping to encourage that northeasterly flow off of the continent and into places like the Pribilofs, where you'll have strengthening north and easterly winds over the next 24 to 48 hours. Low pressure over Prince William Sound is also helping to bring northerly winds across the continent and over some of the south central, so colder air is flowing there. North and easterly winds become more easterly with time as you get out across the central and western Bering. Southwesterly flow across southeast Alaska, 15 to 30 knots. Otherwise, wind speeds are going to be pretty light across the interior, especially at low levels where high pressure and cold air will rule the day. Turbulence shows a better chance for some chop, mainly east of the Alcan. We're going to have some fast-moving winds across the Barrens tomorrow, especially below 5,000 feet, and probably through the Portage Valley as well. So watch for some chop there and some drainage winds that'll be cranking up as we get into tomorrow and the next couple days, as long as high pressures across the interior. Watch for some chop across the southern Bering and, of course, increasing turbulence around the Pribilof Islands as we go into Monday. And below 5,000 feet, a better chance for some occasional moderate, generally north of the central parts of the chain, and a little bit of chop across the northern parts of the Chukchi and Beaufort Seacoast, closer to Point Barrow below 2,000 feet. That's a look at your aviation forecast. I'll be back in just a few minutes with your marine weather. Stay tuned.
A generation ago, America's air transportation system symbolized our national ideal of a bold, progressive country on the move. But as times change, so do society's priorities. Today, as commercial property values soar and residential development around airports burgeons, airplane noise has become a point of contention between the aviation community and the neighborhoods that now surround our airports. For some time now, public airports have been closing at the alarming rate of one each week. But it isn't just airports we're losing. Just as the noisy Boeing 707s, 727s, and Douglas DC-8s are disappearing from the nation's skies today, some communities are implementing operational restrictions so stringent that any airplane larger than a Cessna 152 or Piper Tomahawk may have trouble meeting them. Could our light general aviation airplanes become as obsolete as the first generation of jet airliners?
Hi, I'm Phil Boyer, president of the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association. I know that we pilots are often surprised when the light airplanes we fly generate noise complaints or flight restrictions.
After all, the average residential neighborhood is filled with noises that are louder, longer in duration, and more frequent than overflying airplanes. Most people don't know that the actual ground level volume of a light airplane on climb-out is comparable to the ambient noise of a busy professional office. And it's significantly less than the noise from an interstate highway a quarter-mile away. In fact, as you can see, the typical noise level of a general aviation aircraft, when compared to most other noises in our lives, isn't that dramatic. You'd almost think that light airplanes would fade into the background, but they don't.
You see, scientific studies have shown that people perceive noise as being much louder and more pervasive than it really is. So any passing airplane is imagined to be a window-rattling intrusion into our domestic tranquility.
Whether people's perceptions of aircraft noise are accurate or not, more and more communities are taking steps to monitor and enforce noise reduction measures. In some locations, an array of sophisticated noise sensors tracks and reports airplanes creating noise in excess of local mandates. And in some communities, the benefits of access to the national air transportation system have been lost entirely when airports have been shut down.
In the next few minutes, we'll do two things. First, we'll examine the characteristics that make aircraft noise objectionable to people on the ground. And second, we'll explore some simple pilot techniques that will reduce our noise footprint considerably. But let's make one thing clear at the outset. The pilot's first responsibility is the safety of his passengers and people on the ground. We must make sure that any noise reduction procedure we use is safe and practical, given our personal capabilities and those of the airplane under prevailing conditions. Now, let's take a closer look at noise. The principal source of aircraft noise is the propeller, particularly on high-performance airplanes with constant speed props. The propeller tips at takeoff approach the speed of sound, And that creates a lot of noise. It follows that operating the engine at the slowest RPM, consistent with safety, will create the least amount of noise. A reduction of as little as 200 RPM can reduce by half the perceived noise from a typical high-performance single.
The second most important factor in aircraft noise is how close the airplane is to the listener. If we double the altitude or the lateral distance between our airplane and people on the ground, we generate only 1/4 the perceived noise as before. As little as 500 feet of additional altitude when we cross the airport boundary can cut our perceived noise in half.
Now, numbers don't tell the whole story, though, because of the perception that noise is louder than it really is. For example, this sound is recorded on this tape at the same level as the following sound. Now, which one would we more likely think as noise? Well, one characteristic of sound becomes obvious. A harsh or unpleasant sound seems louder than a pleasant one. An airplane passing overhead may seem loud because, hard as it may be for us pilots to believe, many people perceive the sound as harsh.
Another characteristic, in the same way that flashing lights attract more attention than steady lights, a dramatic change in the pitch or volume of a sound attracts attention. It should be obvious then that abrupt power or RPM changes will attract attention. Finally, noise is relative. Any sound in a normally quiet area will seem louder than it would in a noisy environment.
Here's a look at today's sea ice edge. With north and easterly flow coming off the continent, we do expect some slow growth of the ice moving southward. However, the latest outlook from our sea ice team says the ice may not reach St. Paul this season. With climatological norms in mind and recent trends, we would not expect that edge to make it perhaps that far south. And once again, this ice around Norton Sound may not be entirely stable right now. The concentration's not completely solid just yet, so if you're looking for shore-fast ice in Norton Sound, keep your guard up there. Some of that may not be quite as stable as it appears. And across northern parts of Cook Inlet, concentrations still remain fairly low. Here's a look at southeast weather across Sunday, and you'll notice that south and southeasterly flow continues in light of that recent storm system moving northward with storm force winds today. Things look a lot better tomorrow with the southeasterly flow across Clarence Strait. Winds up to 25 knots and 5 to 8 foot seas are expected there. Otherwise, an onshore flow from the south and west around 20 to 25 knots. Seas ranging from 11 feet in the north to 16 feet in the south. Now across the southeast in Monday, northerlies coming down the Lynn Canal into Stevens Passage and Clarence Strait becomes northwesterly 20 to 30 knots from south to north, and more of an onshore flow due west 15 knots across some of the northern entrances. A north and northeasterly flow from Dixon entrance northward towards Sitka and Port Alexander. A 9 to 10 foot seas expected there on Monday. For south central westerlies across Prince William Sound, again watch for the opportunity for freezing spray, if not heavy freezing spray, with some of these stronger winds coming across the Barrens 30 to 35 knots, 10 to 11 foot seas there. Northwesterlies also moving across Shelikof Strait, enough to produce freezing spray, 25 knots there east of Kodiak Island with an 8 foot sea, and north and easterly winds coming down Cook Inlet 10 to 15 knots with freezing spray possibly there as well. For Monday, north and easterly winds still coming down Cook Inlet, west of the Barrens and through Shelikof Strait, 15 to as high as 30 knots with 11 to 13 foot seas. Northeasterlies through Prince William Sound and past Gore Point and outside of Resurrection Bay. Otherwise, 10-knot winds coming in from the southeast across the northern Gulf, and northeasterlies continue all the way down to Kodiak Island, where they become a little more easterly with time at 20 knots with a 6 foot sea on Monday. Across the Alaska Peninsula, northeasterly winds inside of Bristol Bay with a 3-foot sea, 20-knot winds there. Easterlies north of Cold Bay in the Alaska Peninsula with a 4-foot sea on 35-knot winds. Northwesterlies coming off the peninsula from Castle Cape to Chignik, and southeasterlies south of Sand Point and King Cove, 25 knots with a 5-foot sea. Those diminish as we head into Monday. Southeasterlies south of Kodiak Island and north and easterly winds are still working their way into the Bering at 30 to 35 knots with a 6 to 10-foot sea. For the Aleutians, easterlies still working across the Bering Sea coast at 25 to 30 knots. East and southeasterly winds for the Pacific side, 9 to 11-foot seas there, and northeasterly winds in charge of the western chain at 25 to 30 knots with 12 to 14-foot seas, becoming northerly as we head into Monday with east and northeasterly winds coming into the Bering Sea coast around Adak and Atka. Otherwise, winds are diminishing across the Pacific coast at 15 knots with 10 to 14-foot seas there by Monday. Once again, for the Pribilofs, the blizzard watch starts up on Monday morning. Easterlies will pick up a little bit more there on Sunday with a 9-foot sea. Otherwise, northeasterly winds closer to the south and western coast around 20 to 25 knots. By Monday, you can see that northeasterly push. Freezing spray is still a possibility close to the ice edge. 20-knot winds from the northeast around St. Lawrence and 30-knot winds out around the St. Matthew Island waters with a 10-foot sea on Monday. For the Arctic coast, westerlies coming off of Barrow and moving toward Kaktovik at 20 to 25 knots. Diminishing winds there for the Chukchi Seacoast around 10 to 15 knots. You can see those switch course a little bit from the south and west, Point Hope, Point Lay, all the way up toward Barrow, where those winds become northwesterly and continue down the Beaufort Seacoast around 10 to 25 knots. The strongest winds out around Kaktovik as we head into Monday. Recapping tonight's weather, we still have an awful lot of active weather, especially around the Alcan border to the Copper River Basin and the Alaska Range. The eastern parts of the Gulf of Alaska still looking fairly wet with a south and westerly wind. We expect to see winter weather advisories continue for the Copper River Basin. A winter storm warning is still in effect for the Alaska Range, and winter weather advisories north of the Alaska Range for the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, as well as the 40-mile country and points northward there, with accumulating snow continuing until tomorrow. On the North Slope and the Arctic coast, wind chill advisories for a feels-like index of 45 to 50 below. Same goes for the Seward Peninsula and the Chukchi Seacoast. As we head into tomorrow, it may be just as cold there. And out across the Pribilofs, a blizzard watch is in effect for Monday, again with those easterly winds coming up to about 35 to 40 miles per hour and the possibility of 2 inches of snow. That'll reduce visibility as the storm system moves out of the Pacific and into the southern chain. That will kick the next storm system into the eastern Gulf and make way in the southwest. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.